Alright, so let's now go to some other aberrations here. Before we do that, let's disable 3D aberration and 3D bokeh so we can just save some calculations and I can record this tutorial properly. So the first aberration we can see is spherical aberration, and let's actually make the viewer bigger there, and let's activate it, and let's increase the optical softness, and you can see some softness already happening in the edges of the frame. So let's use a higher value. The f-stop is gonna manage how in or out the spherical aberration goes. So the lower value is gonna be more closer to the corners, and the higher value is gonna get inside the frame. And then you have the highlights limiter. So because this effect might lower the highlights a little bit, usually a value 0.1, which is the default, is enough. But if you need to increase this, you can, and you're gonna have the effect of spherical aberration going on, but you're still going to maintain the value that was in those highlights features before this effect was introduced. So there you have the effect. Let's turn that on and off, and you can see that some of the render noise is gone, and we're gonna deal with that later. And also the image gets a little bit softened. I have tried to do this aberration as close as possible to real life, which is kind of a curtain of it's like you put a very thin and semi-transparent thing in front of the lens. That is kind of how spherical aberration looks. So maybe in later videos with real images, because this is a test image, we're gonna kind of perceive better what this effect is doing. So let's disable spherical aberration now, and let's move to astigmatism. So you can enable that one, and you can select on both tangential and sagittal astigmatisms. So let's start with tangential, and let's increase the tangential controls here. So you have tangential controls and sagittal controls if this is the one you're using. If you're going to use sagittal, you need to push the sagittal button, or if you're going to use tangential, you need to push tangential 1. So we are in tangential. Let's increase the tangential effect, and you can see the result already happening. Then you have this mask control here, the f-stop and the fall-off. These two controls are for both sagittal and tangential. So let's increase the f-stop, and what this does is it pushes the effect out to the corner, and the fall-off is going to introduce some fall-off in the effect. So you kind of have to play with these two until you find the desired effect that you like, and in the areas that you like it to happen. So there it is. You have tangential astigmatism going on there, and let's now change to sagittal, and let's actually, go back to tangential. You can play with the distortion here. So this is kind of going to create a slight breathing effect in there. If that's what you want to do, the default is 0.5, and also you can shift the filtering of this effect in each channel. So if you want to use uniform in red, you're gonna see kind of an aberration going on there. You can also mix that one with other channels. So Maybe you're gonna find these controls kind of interesting in very low contrast shots. Not definitely, I don't see this kind of as a good effect to apply it in very high contrast ones. Maybe a city at night with very bright lights. This is not going to work, so you usually leave this all off Gaussian or all in uniform. So we're going to leave it by default, so it's monochromatic. So let's now indeed change to sagittal. So here you have the sagittal controls, and let's increase the sagittal effect, and you can see the effect happening. Let's disable and enable the effect, and you also can control the how in or out in the frame this effect happens. So let's leave it there so we can see, and you can play with the sagittal swirlness. So this is kind of the angle for the sagittal aberration to happen. So you can actually even reverse it. This happens in very rare lenses. I think I saw this once, but it's usually you're gonna play from 0 to negative. So you can see how the sagittal angle here is changing. So there it is, and 0 is the default. I think maybe shifting this to a 45 degree kind of looks interesting, and of course this is a lot of value. The value that you would use on a normal image is kind of a lot lower, something like that. It's a 0.1, 0.2. But let's say you are doing a very crazy effect in one of those telescopic views or something, and you want to create a very crazy effect. You have the range to do that. So let's disable Astigmatism and let's take a look at Vignette. Alright, so vignetting is nothing too fancy. You can enable that one and just apply a regular vignette. So you can push it in or out, and make it more contrasty or soft, like so. So you can just design your desired vignette like that. So let's turn vignette off and let's go to color cast. So for example, you have the top side of the frame and the bottom side. So let's say you have some color casting of blue in the top side of the frame and red in the bottom. And again, these are going to be very, very low values in real life. In a real comp, you're going to be talking about 0.2s and that kind of, or you can also go negative depending on how you want to mix by adding or subtracting. But in either case, you are going to be talking about very low values of color casting until you notice those in the midtones and in the shadows. So it's going to affect everything, but mainly midtones and shadows. So that's color cast, and let's now move to bloom. Bloom is just as the word suggests, is going to create a bloom, and let's go with more intensity, and there you go. And with f-stop scatter, you can select how much and how far away from the highlight the bloom is going to scatter in the glass elements of the lens. So depending on the aesthetics that you want to achieve, you're gonna play with that one. Before we jump into our next tab, which is matte box, just wanna touch briefly on noise. So let's enable astigmatism. So whether you're using spherical aberration or astigmatism, you're gonna see that you lose the render engine noise properties, and with it also, of course, because you're applying this by filtering in Nuke, not only in this node, but probably if you want to do astigmatism, you're gonna have to be doing some kind of filtering. You're gonna lose render noise. And by saying render noise, what I'm talking about specifically is about recovering some of the render engine noise before you regrain the image and do your final render, because otherwise you're gonna have kind of a mismatch between the areas that are purely in focus with untouched noise and those who are very out of focus or highly blurred by any of these effects. So the renoise tab is going to be important for recover noise in these areas, but we're going to talk about that later. Let's now jump to the matte box tab in our next video.